Today, I have some very special guests on the podcast. I have Rick McVick, Shailene, and Vendertron. How are you all doing today?
Good. Very good.
Everyone answer at once. Everyone talk at once. Do it.
No. Without too much dead air, I figured I'd jump in. How are you, Dave?
I'm doing well. Are you all enjoying the spooky season?
The spooky season? You know,
That's what we're calling it.
I've phased into watching all of my favorite movies that I like to watch.
What are your
throughout the
favorite
month of
spooky season movies?
Oh, I've got like Legend of anything Tim Burton. First of all, you know, we've got Legend of Sleepy Hollow,
Batman
Beetlejuice, all the Batmans, and then you know, Edward Scissorhands, and then of course the coveted Hocus Pocus with Bette Midler. And Kathy Najimy, Sarah Jessica Parker.
I had a feeling you were going to say Hocus Pocus.
Oh, of course. And then, I don't know. I'm a goofy horror fan. Like, I don't like really scary movies. Like The Conjuring. I couldn't sleep for like 2 weeks after watching that movie.
What about Army of Darkness or the Evil Dead stuff with like Ash?
So, yeah, I do like the virus movies. The zombie. Yeah, it's good.
I feel like
comes with the territory, I suppose, but.
I feel like some parts of The Conjuring though are rather funny. Like sometimes when you see when you actually see the monster, when it's not just like hiding about and it's like a little girl with like green all over her face or something that's like speaking in a very low voice. Like to me, that's just kind of comedic at times where it's like once the mystery is gone, it's like, oh,
hey man, Dave, perspective is power.
I'm too empathetic for horror movies because like. You know, I went through like a slasher kick in high school, and they would bug me because I'm like, yeah, they were all jerks. All the teenage kids are idiots, and they deserved that, but they were only kids, man. They didn't know that house was going to be haunted. They didn't know Jason was in there. Like that's not fair, you know. I remember like Chainsaw Remake. And like one of the kids was on like a meat hook, and I'm like, that kid's like 18, man. Like I can't do this. Like I can't watch them. I can watch ghost movies, stuff like that, but I can't do the slasher stuff. I want to watch House of a Thousand Corpses, but I can't.
I managed to con my wife into watching the new Haunting of Bly Manor just because I like the spooky period ghost stories. And the two things that she is afraid of the most are like creepy mirrors and dolls. And there's literally an episode where that's the shtick. Is there are creepy mirrors and dolls. And she did not sleep well.
Monster flick. Yeah, I do like a good monster flick. So like Stranger Things and Cloverfield, Super 8. So monster flicks.
Quick question. Do we know if there's going to be a new season of Stranger Things?
Oh yeah, they're not stopping.
Yeah.
They have no plans on stopping.
Because they usually release it around this time.
Yeah,
but I haven't seen anything yet.
Yeah.
They put out the last one in the summer instead of during spooky season.
Oh yeah,
So yeah, it was like at the 4th of July.
Oh yeah,
the real Halloween.
Hey,
it's 2020, man.
I know everything's ridiculous.
It's all backwards.
It is definitely.
Sorry, I didn't mean to offend anybody there.
New Zealand's fine. They're like, I don't know. He's out fine down here.
Yeah.
So, have you all played? I'm assuming, as I know that you have, but what are some of your favorite like horror games, survival horror games, or just games in general that scare you?
Okay, so I do not cope super well with horror games. I love horror as a genre. I read a ton of horror books, love horror books, horror podcasts, horror movies. I love that stuff. But I can't handle it in game form. I get too scared. I think I'm just too invested. I played the first Dead Space. It took me years to get through Dead Space, right? Dead Space is genius. It's a brilliant game.
It's a great game. It's not scary.
It took me years to get through it because I would get too scared and I would quit. And finally I had to set it on the easiest difficulty just so that I wouldn't struggle. Because like it's not a hard game either, but I would panic and just be pushing buttons and dropping my controller and stuff. So I don't cope super well with scary games. I did an Amnesia stream one time, the original Amnesia.
That's a rough one.
That is a
As
rough
soon
one.
as the stream went down, I uninstalled the game and
breathing into a
very
bag.
literally threw my computer out the window. Like, no.
She's like, if I don't uninstall it, it will haunt my PC. It's gone.
I might have actually uninstalled it on stream. Now that I think about it.
I think they call it noping right out of there. I think that's what you noped right out of that one.
Yeah, I've played the first 30 minutes of a bunch of great horror games: Outlast, Blair Witch, Layers of Fear, all kinds of great horror games. I played the first half hour.
Didn't you play PT?
I did. I loved PT. I was able to handle PT because it was such a contained experience.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that like the part with the crying fetus, like
What is it with Hideo
that
Kojima
almost
and
broke
fetuses,
me.
man?
He
Like
loves them.
I don't. Ooh, it was bad. PT was incredible though. I made it all the way through to the secret trailer with Norman Reedus.
Norman
It
Reedus
was really
fetus.
good. Really, really good. That was the first Reedus fetus. Yes, the original, the precursor.
Yuck.
It was horrible. Did you ever play PT?
Me?
Yeah.
No, I didn't have a PlayStation to do it.
Okay, I still have it installed on my PS4, so I feel like we're gonna have to make this.
Mail
a
me
thing.
the PS4.
You can, if you have downloaded it before, you can. I've downloaded it before, but I've deleted it, and so it won't naturally load. But somebody figured out a way to do it. That
Yeah.
it really doesn't break anything, but it's like it's just complicated enough that I don't really feel like it. Like it's like I have a PlayStation Vita, and I feel like I can jailbreak that now, and I would enjoy that. But it's easy to do, but it's just complicated enough that it's like that would take an hour of my time.
Yeah.
And it might brick it.
I just don't feel like it. But
Yeah.
It's like an hour-long experience, you know.
yeah, yeah. But I remember playing PT when it like came out, and everybody was trying to figure out what all the little secrets were and what. And my favorite was all the people
puzzles are
like
so weird.
yelling into the microphone or like whispering into the microphone the name of the ghost. They were like Laura. And this people walking around this hallway.
I want a Hideo horror game. That would be the most twisted thing ever, and it would just mess with your head. I want him to do a horror game. It would be amazing, I think.
He has said
But-
before in his tweets. I'm a big Metal Gear fan. And-
Yep, me too.
And he's tweeted before about how he's literally tweeted, I think, I really want to do another horror game, and is like
Another?
tweeted a
Oh,
bunch
right.
tweeted a bunch of like horror movies that he has been watching. So, and I guess Death Stranding is kind of, it can be a little
Horror
bit.
hiking game.
There's a spooky element.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I want him to make a contained like horror game. You know, my scary game experience started when I was like 11, somewhere around there. I can't remember exactly where, but it was around that age with Resident Evil 3. And I went over to my cousin's house because my mom did not like anything with like violence or blood. Like she thought GoldenEye was too bloody, you know, because of the red like stains, like the Kool-Aid stains that they would get on the shirts when you shot them. So she
Visceral
thought that was
game.
too bloody. Yeah. So she's like, you know, Resident Evil right out. So I went over to my cousin's house to play it. And he was like 20. I don't know how old he was, 30 something. I don't know. Anyway, he had already beaten Resident Evil 3. So he had like put the minigun on for me. So I had like the easiest cakewalk through Resident Evil, but I had never experienced a game like that in my life where it was a fixed camera. The soundtrack would mess with you. I remember walking into like the police station in the this really beautiful like quiet, delicate piano, and then the soundtrack would go away and you're and I'd jump every time thinking like Nemesis was pounding the door to get in, and it was just part of the music. But that was like my first horror experience. It was also with Resident Evil, and just the idea of government conspiracy had never crossed my little tiny, you know, brain until I was like, wait a minute, the government can do secret stuff and nobody knows about it. Like, you know, I had no idea what Bay of Pigs was or anything at that point. So I was like, whoa, this is crazy. And then like it was a virus and like they were experimenting with stuff. Like, oh, this is crazy. And so that's what screwed me with Resident Evil. And then Silent Hill games were just a natural lead out of Resident Evil, because the Silent Hill 2 was the one I devoted the most time with Pyramid Head. And just a game where you don't realize that the enemies are completely based off of the psychosis of the main protagonist, and just it was such a cool game. But yeah, those were kind of like the Resident Evil and Silent Hills are always my wheelhouse of scary games. I did play Dead Space, but it got to be like The Matrix almost, where you're just like dismember, and
shut
then
up.
hit them in the head,
Shut
and then
up.
walk past them, and it was super easy.
Shut up.
What about you, Vinder?
I don't know. I'm not much of a horror fan. Like my version of the horror movies are Tim Burton's films. So by extension, the horror games that I've played consisted of like the Grim Reaper coming to take my body away in The Sims. So I did play Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice for about 15 minutes before I cried and turned it off.
Scary.
So yeah.
Oh, it's such a good game though. It's
So good.
I can't do it.
My friend
It's
was like,
very
play that with
intense.
headphones, and I did that. And I was like, I don't want to play it with headphones anymore.
It's visceral. That was one of the most visceral experiences I ever had playing a game.
Yeah, honestly, like
Gosh.
Fallout, I would say the zombies in Fallout really is about like what are they called?
Goals.
Thank you. Sorry. I had a little bit of a stroke there for a second. Yeah, the ghouls
You're not playing golf.
in Fallout.
Yeah, those goals can be like, that's the frustrating thing about 76 sometimes, is you don't even hear them coming.
And then
And I was like,
suddenly
"Wah!"
they're like diving at your face and you're like, "Ah!"
See, but sometimes if you're doing like the stealth mode and you're sneaking around the house and you can hear their feet shuffling,
little scritches.
and you're just like, sometimes if you're not playing in a team, you're just by yourself, you can hear their feet, and it's the scariest thing because you're like, where is it? It's gonna get me. Is it behind me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think
that's
gonna be
kind of my
scary.
idea of horror in games. I will say that I did make it all the way through A Plague Tale: Innocence, which was gifted to me by the lovely Shalene here. But that was more like I played it out of scientific interest because it was about a plague. But
I
there
will
were
say-
elements of horror in it that were quite
Well,
disturbing.
dude, the rats, man.
Yeah.
That's awful.
That's
will say-
exactly how I imagine it's going to be like if I go to hell. Because I have worked with so many laboratory rodents over my career. They're just all waiting for me down there.
So you all do a number of different activities in your free time, but predominantly in the podcast world, you do GameStack and that Fallout show. And this is a great point to bring up. In GameStack, which is kind of your general gaming news and interest podcast that you all do, you always pick a game of the year, and last year you picked A Plague Tale: Innocence. So I'm going to make a request, and that we not pick anything really terrible that could actually happen in next year's picks. Let's go for, I don't know, not Doom. That's pretty popular. Let's not do The Last of Us 2. That feels like a repeat at this point.
It's kind of a good thing that we're not expecting a Fallout 5 for like another 6 years, maybe.
Yeah. Let's not do.
Animal
Goaty?
Crossing New Horizons
No,
game of
I
the
was,
year.
I was going to say Goaty.
Tetris.
Goaty 2020
Just
is
Tetris.
Among Us.
Oh, yeah, Among Us. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
Among Us. I can't even think of like games that came out this year. Oh, I can tell you easily. Probably Goaty is going to be Cyberpunk
That's.
if it actually comes out this year.
But then that's also kind of terrible at the same time.
It's dystopian.
It
I mean,
is,
Blade
yeah.
Runner-esque.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Yeah.
some people are living the high life, some aren't.
So kind of rounding it back to survival horror games in general, I really wanted to talk to you all about, I guess, centering around the Resident Evil series. And I know that you're, of course, a big fan, Rick. So I'm curious and what you think separates this, like Resident Evil is a series, and I think Silent Hill is right there in with it too, as opposed to other games like I know that you all play a lot of Dying Light or no, not Dying Light, Left 4 Dead, or also Dying Light as well. What kind of separates it from those? It's like, I guess, like what we now consider zombie games, like Call of Duty zombies or what have you.
Puzzles.
Yeah, she's not wrong. She's not wrong.
The newer games really dumb down the puzzles. They're like, here's a puzzle. You've got a keyhole that's got a square symbol, so you got to find a key that's got a square symbol on it. And that's kind of the puzzles in this one. And when I first played Resident Evil 3 or even 2 and 1, there were like, slide statues around. There were, like gear puzzles and a clock tower, and there were a whole bunch of different types of things that you had to do. And they kind of went away from the puzzle aspect in Resident Evil 4. But even before that, Resident Evil 4 or Resident Evil series always dealt with your classic zombies. They shuffle around. Maybe when you get near them, they kind of like use their body weight to lunge at you. But that's kind of it. They didn't run. They had special zombies, which were like the I just watched Terminator, so T-1000's in my head, but that's not right. But the Nemesis, and then there was like a couple other types of main baddies. Usually like the one scientist who injected himself with the T virus or G virus, and then he got an eyeball in his shoulder now and a big giant scythe of an arm. And so there was always elements of that sprinkled in that made the game more difficult. But nowadays, zombies were always like, they sprint. They can think a little bit more. Like with Left 4 Dead, there's more special zombies sprinkled in, or a World War Z where the zombies can like think a little bit, and they do that whole, they climb up the wall bit. And what's some others? The Dying Light, they run and sprint. They kind of parkour around with you. So what's the island one?
Dead Island.
Dead Island. Yeah.
Dead Island's another one where I think the zombies are a little bit more than shuffling around. So Resident Evil just was still in that classic vein. They weren't the classic voodoo zombies, but it was still the
Right. I'm trying to think. I think would you consider, like in Fallout 76, which I know we've got a lot of crossover between those people that like the game and like this podcast. Wouldn't you say that are the Scorched zombies? What do you think about that? Would you think that they would be?
I would say that they're more, those like fungi that take over insects and make the insects get eaten. But I'd say it's more like that, where they're not necessarily, their brain's not working anymore.
Well,
something else.
So like more akin to clickers?
Yeah.
Because by pop culture definition, a zombie is somebody who has come back from the dead.
Right.
So have Scorched come back from the dead?
No, they've died and now they're being controlled by an infection.
Have they died? Or have they just
Have
mutated?
they come back from the dead, right? So
That's true.
I don't think the Scorched ever really die. I think they just sort of transform.
yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right, because they yell pain. Like they register that they're in pain. Don't they say help us sometimes?
Not us is something that I hear a lot.
And then I think in Wastelanders they had the dude that was they got caught and he was like going to turn into a Scorched or something like that. They gave him like a little gas mask or whatever.
Yeah.
In my opinion, even the ghouls I don't think are zombies. In my opinion,
They're more of a mutant.
yeah, they've lost their mind. They didn't die. They just went crazy.
Kind of lost it. Yeah. So
do Resident Evil zombies, do they die?
Yes.
Okay.
well,
they die and reanimate.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, I guess they do die because they get bit. I'm curious about. I'm particularly not as familiar with 5, but I would imagine at some point that since there's multiple viruses within the series, that there would be one that infects the living as opposed to.
Yes, there is. Starting in 4, so in the first 3, in Resident Evil 1 you had the T virus, and I think in 2 or 3 it switches over to the G virus. It's a new version.
Yeah.
Those, you die, and then you reanimate. Like electrical synapses then reboot in your head. You basically just reboot. If you get bit, you're infected, and the infection kills you and then reanimates you. In Resident Evil 4, you were infected with something I think called the Las Plagas.
Yeah.
and that would control you. There was a dude that had a staff with a particular type of creature that sent out a certain type of like frequency that controlled the people. They did not die. And 5, there's another version where they shove something down your mouth and then it controls you like a brain controller thing.
That's what I was trying to remember. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm fairly certain that that's kind of the way it is now, and 6 as well. I never played 6 because it was too explodey and actiony, and I don't like that type of Resident Evil.
Yeah, 6 is interesting because it's like they tried to make 4 different Resident Evil games and cram them onto one, and so like 1 is like a sequel to Resident Evil 4, and you're like, oh, cool. And then another one is a sequel to 5, and it's like, oh, let's get all of our machine guns and brood up, and we're gonna punch some boulders some more. And it's like, I don't know if I really want to punch any boulders.
I always wanted to play the Raccoon City tactical game, but I never.
I made the misfortune of being like, that sounds like fun, and that was quite the misfortune of saying,
oh no, it looked like it could be so good.
So kind of talking about even Raccoon City. How much do you think location plays into survival horror in general, even outside of Resident Evil? So does I
feel like it matters a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The atmosphere is the most important thing in a survival horror game to me. Like, are you trapped? And what resources are available? Because the scarcity of resources is one of the biggest like attributes of
Mechanics,
a survival horror
yeah.
game. Yeah.
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 And I mean, I wouldn't categorize anything in the Fallout franchise particularly horror based, but they are one idea or concept that has sort of broken that mold in that, in setting the game on a radioactive backdrop, they've been able to use multiple locations, but still have that element of scariness to it.
Yeah. New Vegas is a perfect example of that, where the desert is not inherent. Well, I mean, in a way, the desert is inherently terrifying, but not really.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But when you see the broken down facility in the background, that's like the scary part.
But then you take something like Dead Money. Dead Money is straight up horror.
Oh yeah,
Dead Money
that's
was
true.
definitely a horror. Yeah.
I would also nailed that.
I would also say, a good example of, and we've seen a couple in the last year or two, is Chernobyl based, story based and horror based games. Chernobyl is an excellent backdrop for horror based,
like the Stalker games, things like that.
And
there's also the Chernobyl video game that's coming out.
Yeah. So there's 2 actually right now. There's one that's already out. It's called Chernobyl Light, which is more of a horror based. But the other one that they're currently working on, and it might be in beta or alpha.
Is that the one that's like Metro-ish?
With
guns and shooting stuff?
But the one
that's the one I'm thinking.
The one that's being developed right now is meant to be more of an educational thing. Like it's
cool.
supposed to sort of teach you about the history of Chernobyl and
that's interesting.
That's really cool.
I'm sure Andrew Leatherbarrow had a hand in drafting that up.
It's kind of like the what is it, the discovery modes that Assassin's Creed has been doing. I think
right, yeah.
Where it's like you can go and visit the cities, and it's like there's no like fighting or anything, but you can learn about a number of the different folklore or actual real history. That kind of stuff is always interesting.
Like a museum.
There's always been this sort of post-apocalyptic backdrop to horror games, and I think only recently have we really sort of seen space as another venue for that with what was that game with the mimics?
Prey.
Prey.
Yeah. And that one kind of had like a clean cut. It kind of had this like corporate industrial feel where it was like office spaces, and it made it for me. It made office spaces scary when it's like that coffee cup could be an alien.
Yeah,
I just took it as a metaphor for actually working in an office.
Everything is here to arm you and bring you demise.
I think Ghostwire Tokyo is probably going to be one of the best horror games we see in the next couple years.
Yeah, I'm really looking. I really like Shinji Mikami. He's one of the original producers of Resident Evil 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and then he went on to do The Evil Within.
He sold me on that game.
And then now I think he worked with, he like double teamed this project with the delightful lady, and I'd forgotten her name.
She left, didn't she?
Ikumi Nakamura.
Right. Yeah. She was the one that did the Bethesda E3 presentation, and I think introduced that game and was very delightful.
She did leave the company. Yeah.
Yeah, she left. Yeah.
You reminded me when you said Ghostwire Tokyo. Reminded me of one of probably my favorite survival horror game, which was Fatal Frame 2: Crimson Butterfly.
I haven't thought about that game in a long time.
Dude, I forgot about how that game terrified me. Like, so real quick, just to kind of recap, the premise is you're a twin. You're twin young girls. You're 15-year-old schoolgirls in the typical Japanese schoolgirl outfit, and you're lost in the woods, right? And you stumble upon this ghost village, and the only thing you have to defend yourself is this camera called the Camera Obscura, and it basically sucks the souls out of ghosts that are left behind. And I remember one of the most terrifying things is you go down this stairwell, and when you get down to the bottom, you hear this girl just scream, and this girl figure just smack the floor, come down from 3 stories and smack, and her arms are broken, her legs broken, and she just starts lifting herself up and coming after you. And I was
forget that noise.
And The Ring, remember the girl with the hair and she climbs out of the TV, right? Well, they did that in Crimson Butterfly before that movie was made, where this girl gets out of a trunk and is bent over with the hair, and you're taking pictures, trying to kill this ghost, man. And that game was one of the most terrifying just experiences, because all you had was this stupid camera.
I'm scared now. I'm gonna have to sleep with the lights on.
I wonder if they have that on PC. I gotta look now.
Yeah. I feel like we can't talk about horror games without also mentioning the original BioShock. There's definitely a horror element to the original BioShock. I remember just the feeling in the pit of my stomach in the beginning of that game when you get out of that
bathysphere.
Bathysphere, yeah, you get out of the bathysphere. And there's the lady with the wrench. It's so scary.
Yeah,
it's so scary.
I'm pretty sure that first level, I think it was a surgeon, and then you had this singular light that illuminated the very center of the room, and that's where you stood. And the rest of everything else was so dark you really couldn't see it. And you had all these psychos running at you. That, I mean, as far as location design, that's probably one of the best for video games ever. As far as environmental storytelling, I mean, that's kind of what kicked off a lot of the modern retellings, really. That and a combination of that and Half-Life that kind of kicked all that stuff off.
Yeah, Ravenholm. Is that what it's called, Ravenholm?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think.
Forever.
I'm pretty sure. I think my favorite right now, my favorite as far as location and I guess giving it all to serve the purpose of it is in Resident Evil 7 with the house. If you think about it, it's good. Just a house. It is a house with a living room and there's a kitchen and all they have a little guest house over here. It's not like the Resident Evil mansions where it's here's the study room. It's massive. Yes, and the rich people live in the tea room. It's it is a southern. It's I mean, as far
as it's a plantation home.
Your real estate value would be pretty high, even though it'd probably be a fixer upper in the end.
I think that house was quite a fixer upper.
Yeah, but just looking at that, and not only the location being scary of walking into a bathroom, or oh no, I have to go down into the basement. This is some of the living horror that we deal with, where it's you know what, I really don't want to go down into my basement after midnight. That doesn't sound like a fun thing that I particularly want to do. But even the characters serve that purpose, and they were the domestic, the what we consider the nuclear family in America, and it was all disturbed to all points.
Yeah. I mean, but genuinely, you put anything in the southern bayou, and you put a creepy family with a thick, Creole accent. It's like a scary trope. I mean, think about all the games or movies that even use hoodoo or voodoo as as a mechanism for their scariness.
Skeleton Key. So good, so good.
Well, there was that Body Swappers movie where this girl goes to take care of some people, take care of like an old person, and like the young lawyer and whatever kept body swapping down the line, and that was a southern, kind of thing. So yeah. I mean, and that whole area, because it's steeped in just mysticism anyway in real life.
I love all that stuff. Yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful. I mean, I love that style of horror. That's kind of voodoo, hoodoo, southern area.
Yeah,
the
kind of like Southern Gothic stuff has kicked off in the first years, and I don't know if you probably haven't, but on HBO Max, and this podcast is not sponsored by HBO Max. I'm just letting you know.
I have it, so this might be something worth watching.
Yeah, maybe if you're a part of HBO Max, let me know.
I am,
but Lovecraft Country is
I've been wanting to see that.
Is a lot like that. It's through African Americans in, I think it's like the 1950s, and it's like the whole premise is they are trying to like make this travel book so that African Americans can travel without being,
Yeah, they're trying to figure out what's a sunset town and what isn't, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Shalene, we forgot to mention Hunt.
Oh, right. Hunt.
That is a very action-packed survival horror.
Hunt is a unique take on horror because it's also got that PvP element where the real monsters are the other people, and it's very. There's a lot going on in Hunt.
Have you heard about this?
I've not. What is the Hunt?
Hunt Showdown.
I have heard of that. But go ahead and
it takes place in like 1895. So it takes place in 1895, and the idea is you're a bounty hunter, and there's a map, and there's 1 to 2. I call them big bads. It's a big giant monster, and you have to find clues to find the monster. But so are other teams. You can either do a solo, duo, or a quad. Group, and there's other teams looking for the monster. So when you find the monster, when you start fighting it, everybody knows where that monster is. So then they try to kill you, who has the bounty, and you have to like kill the monster and get out. All the weapon is period specific. So it's kind of this weird, like fast-paced move dodge thing, but you're like using single action revolvers.
Yes, and it takes so long to reload. So
one bullet at a time.
It's very fast, but also very slow at the same time. It creates a unique sort of tension, and it's a weird balance of wanting to survive and kill the things, but also not wanting to make any noise to alert the other players.
Yeah. And you have like this little ability. So after you kill the monster, not only now is it scary because the monster. One of them is a spider, and the spider is made of human pieces, right? In the mouth of the spider is a face. And so once Vendor's like, just nope, he's no. So once you kill this thing, you get an ability where you can see the other players around you. Like if other bounty hunters in your proximity, you can use this sight for like 2 seconds to see everybody. So there was one time, man, where we fought and killed the big bad, and then we pull up this thing, and you see like a bunch of white wispy ghosts that are other bounty hunters that are surrounding you, and you're like, now we have to get out alive, and it's such a great. Now I'm being hunted. I'm now the bounty,
And I think it's interesting, and I got to play a few rounds of that. I decided I was no good at it because I was playing, I think, single player, and I don't think it's meant to be played just one person.
It's very hard by yourself.
The spider is creeptacular. It's the most creeptacular. I'm not afraid of spiders, and like I'm like the kind of person that I'll see a spider and I'll like go and like, well, you're not supposed to be here, and move it to another location. Like I'm cool with that. That spider is creepy, and the way that they designed it is creepy, and it's crawling over the walls, and it's crawling over. So when I had to fight it, it was like in a barn, and you have like those like old school bear traps.
Yes.
I would just go to the front of the barn, lay one of those down, and then run in, see if the spider could like find me or whatever, and then run out and get it caught in the trap, and then like shoot it once and repeat it all over again because I'm not going in there with it. There was no way. There was nothing that could force me to go in there with that spider.
The worst thing is you throw a lantern at it and it catches it on fire, and then it runs around and catches the whole barn on fire, and then it's just like everything's on fire.
You can also catch your team on fire.
You touch your other
So I guess while we're talking about enemies, oftentimes I think in horror there's like we've often talked about we haven't often talked about it, but there's kind of this, I guess, this reaction to fear that's the fight or flight reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of, I guess, scenarios in games have you noticed that subvert that make you do something different? So like in Resident Evil, it's like I have to solve this puzzle or do this thing or throw this lever instead of running away from the giant zombie mega shark that's in the basement. I have to actually think and use a different set of skills to do that. Have you noticed any other, I guess, games or scenarios that's been the case?
The one that I want to bring up is Outlast, which of course is a game where you can't fight. You don't have any fighting ability at all. That's just not an option. So these horrible, scary guys are coming after you, and you can just hide in the closet. That's the only thing you can really do. And so badly you have this drive to fight back, but you can't. So
Amnesia's that way too. There's a lot of games that use that as a mechanic where you just have no fighting ability. I don't like that though.
And then isn't Amnesia? I'm pretty sure that's the one where if you don't have enough lights on, like if you don't have enough torches lit or something, it like decreases your mental state.
Yeah. There was one part where like the room started getting all weird, and I was watching Shalene play it. There's another game I can't think of. Eternal Darkness, I think maybe for the GameCube, would actually mess with you. So depending on your sanity meter, like you would boot the game up and all your saves would be gone, and then you're like, where did my saves? And then they'd pop back up. Or like in the middle of a boss fight, it would say controller's disconnected, and you'd have to like fiddle with the controller, but it wasn't really disconnected. Or a friend of mine said that one time he was walking and his limbs started falling off, and then it just like put all of his limbs back on and he was fine. So that's another game where it actually messes with you physically. Not even from a horror standpoint, but just like, what is going on? Why is the with Bethesda, we'd be like, this is, bug or feature. With like this game, that was a feature.
I think Eternal Darkness is often overlooked as probably one of the better. Here's the thing. I'm an Eternal Darkness stan. I can probably go put my fingers on that GameCube game. I think I still have it.
Nice.
The amount of that was so interesting in that game because you were going through history, like you were looking at ancestors. So like you would go back to like Roman times, and then you would go to like this Persian, what do you call it, marketer, the guy that like goes in the Brahmin caravan, a seller of things.
Oh, merchant.
A merchant. That's it. That's the right word. A seller of things.
Khajiit has wares.
Like a Persian merchant, or you were going back to like 1800s. Like you were going through all these different people, and it was a lot similar to Resident Evil, but it had a sanity meter. And I remember looking up, and I was thinking, I was like, why don't other games have this like sanity meter where instead of like health, it tracks how sane your character is? And it turns out. So fun fact, Nintendo published that game and they copyrighted the sanity meter. It's one of the few M-rated games that Nintendo has published, and they copyrighted the sanity meter. So
that is interesting.
You haven't seen any like direct, like a lot of it is Resident Evil, where it's like from that perspective, oh, you're going through these rooms, you're solving the puzzles, and it's like, oh, you got the shotgun. Like it's similar to that, but I think it's funny that they went out of their way to copyright that, and so there hasn't been anything like that since.
Such an underrated game, too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's see. I'm just curious of how do you all think that like survival horror in general has went on to influence other mediums, whether it be games, whether it be movies, whether it be any form of entertainment? Do you all think that it's had what kind of impact have you seen from horror games particularly?
Okay, so if I could speak from sort of a reality public health perspective, we've seen an uptick in doomsday preppers as a result of pop culture, survival, post-apocalyptic. So I think that's one societal side effect. And
by the way, this is feel free to speak your mind. This is an open format. There's no It is whatever you're feeling. So feel free. Do not step on eggshells around me. I don't step on eggshells myself. I mean, I do step on eggshells very hard. Break them.
I'm trying to think of what actually started the zombie craze. I mean, you could definitely see Walking Dead had a direct influence off of Resident Evil. Like, those parallels exist. Resident Evil, I think it was just one of those games that I don't know why it had such a resonant factor with the public.
I think didn't it originate from like Night of the Living Dead? Like George Romero's 1968 film. Yeah. That's like where zombies started, kind of.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Dawn of the Dead as well. The original. The idea of post-apocalyptic stories, I think, capture people's imagination because of the rarity of those things. It's never happened in human history, as far as humans are concerned. It's never, happened. And that's why those things are terrifying, because it's an unknown factor. It's something as humans we've never experienced together. And zombies, I don't know why zombies. I guess because for most people, I imagine it's the same thing. If you see a dead animal, there's something fascinating and terrifying about it. Like, I don't want to go touch that dead bird, because what if the dead bird moves, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's that underlying thing of like, what if the dead thing twitches? That's not cool. So I don't know. That may be why zombies are kind of fascinating, because they break what's supposed to be.
I've always felt that zombies became such a prevalent video game enemy in particular because they're safe.
Yeah, that too.
It's okay to kill a zombie. You don't have to worry about the ethical issues of killing a zombie.
So after the show, there's going to be this whole like zombie lives matter, and people are going to be putting stickers and
Undead United.
Do you realize what you've done, Shalene?
There's never been, you think about this. There's never, in all of the zombie movies or games, there's never been zombie children you've had to shoot.
Well,
you've
anyway,
never had to shoot a zombie kid.
Continue on your line of thinking, Shalene.
No, that was pretty much it. Yeah. It was as a kid playing the first shooters, all of the enemies were either zombies or Nazis, because those were things that were safe to hate.
Right. Like Doom and I mean, that was technically,
demons.
Demons, yeah.
Yeah. Again, safe.
Yeah.
I think we can all get behind not liking demons.
Demons, yeah, we can.
Yeah.
We can get behind not liking demons and zombies, but apparently these days it's rather hard on the Nazi front. But
I still don't like them.
I don't either.
I mean,
I'm still a supporter of World War II era type tactics.
Me too.
Same.
I would call myself an originalist. The thing that I'm thinking about is escape rooms. Have you all played or done an escape room? I feel like that there would not be escape rooms without Resident Evil, because
interesting.
Those like the mechanics of the game of the original games and not necessarily 4 is where it all deviated, and we were roundhouse kicking zombies and using Tommy guns,
which was fun,
which was great, and I love
but
it.
Not the same.
Yeah. If you go and do that, if you go and do those, like in any of the escape room, it's very similar to like those original Resident Evil games, and I guess adventure games in general, where it's like, okay, now that I know the combo to this lock, I unlock the lock and I get like one piece of another puzzle. And that's kind of how it is with Resident Evil as a series. It's like all very puzzle based and like gating yourself off of different areas so that you can't, I'm in the foyer now and I can't get to the garden house because I don't have the blue armor key for whatever reason.
Oh, dude, Resident Evil 3 and those freaking I've got the spade key and the diamond key, and you're like, frick, who designed this police station?
Yeah, and I like in the modern ones and in the remakes and in 7 where it's like once you've used it all the times, the games will just tell you and be like, you don't need this anymore.
Yes, dude. You hang on to so much stuff in the old games because you're like, I might need this key again.
I might need this and it's like stuff that seems useful, like what do you call a lock breaker, like those like little like I'm doing a motion over the podcast that doesn't translate
like
very
cutters.
well. Yeah, bolt cutters is what
bolt
I mean.
Cutters.
I can't bolt cutters and merchants today are apparently two words that I can't pull out of the SAT prep guidebook. But that seemed like a bolt cutter seems like something I'm gonna need this. Like this seems like something I'm gonna need if I'm going through like all this mansion and all of this different, in the town when you're doing Resident Evil 3 and then the police department stuff. It's like some of those items you think, oh, I can use it. But it's funny in the later games, they're like, yeah, you're good. And it's funny if you've done any of the modern iterations where they have essentially hints, like you press a little button in the room and you're like, hey, I need a little help. I always think that's funny because it's like, oh, we need to consult the guidebook at this point. We need to like go pull up the strategy guide and figure out, okay, where are we? What are we doing? What do we need? And you don't want to read all the way ahead because you don't want to spoil yourself, but you definitely want to be, I guess, let off the hook for a little bit of it. I've always thought that the escape rooms are, Resident Evil personified.
I ain't gonna let it get to me, I'm just gonna creep down in Pumpkin Hill, I got to find my lost piece. I know that it's here, I can sense it in my feet. The great emerald's power allows me to feel. I can't see a thing, but it's around somewhere. I'm gonna hold my
So the one thing you were talking about escape rooms, and it reminded me of back in the day. I used to play a ton of paintball, and I stumbled upon something called Zombie Experiences, and it's only in Britain. And I was so bummed because what they've done is they have factories and houses and complexes like malls where you and a group of friends get paintball guns and have to get from point A to point B and do missions in between while being inundated upon actual like zombies. Like people trying to catch you and get you, and they're bloodied up and they look like zombies. It's like $80 per person to run a course for like an hour and a half or something. But like you get to find weapons, shoot zombies, and like actually live the Walking Dead experience. That is something I've always wanted to do, but there's none that are around here. I always wanted to be like, give me like an airsoft gun.
That sounds
like,
so fun.
And I'm pretty certain they actually give you like arms training, like a half an hour of like arms training so you know how to operate the guns. That way you don't walk in and you're like, how do you do poof? Shoot yourself in the face with an airsoft BB. But
like the same level of safety for skydiving.
Yeah. Well, with skydiving, at least you're tandem. But anyway, that's all. The kind of on the escape room thing, I was a big scenario paintball player, so I always looked for scenarios. It wasn't simply like Team Deathmatch was so GoldenEye 64. Give me something that's like more mission oriented. But anyway,
I understand that. All right, give me 1 second. My other computer, I have my work computer and my regular computer, and my other computer just stopped.
Blump.
Pull the notes. Fortunately, it's not this computer. All right, Vinder, are you prepared for your? This is where I'm going to grill you. Actually, you're just going to educate the people. I'm not going to grill you.
Okay.
See, you are. Before we even get into it, you are like in the like epidemiology field or adjacent to such a thing. I'm not just like making that up, right?
Yeah, no. So I have a Master of Science in Public Health Epidemiology from the University of Alberta, and I am right now currently doing a PhD in clinical epidemiology. Yeah.
I had 1 semester of medical geography, so
you're practically almost there.
Do you know where the body parts are? Is that medical geography? Point to the ankle. There's the ankle.
Yeah. I mean, one of the silver linings of COVID-19 is that we will all come out of this a little bit more knowledgeable about epidemiology.
Yeah,
some infectious diseases.
Some of
I
us.
feel like that maybe the Western world is going to be a little more mindful, as mindful as we should have been. Maybe is a good way. Yeah.
Maybe. You live
Hindsight
in
is
a
always,
very different part of West Virginia than I would have
hindsight's
expected.
always 2020. So
This year is definitely going to be hindsight 2020.
see what I did there? See what I did there?
Oh my goodness.
By the way, Shalene, happened again. He said COVID-19, and all I could think of was Kenneth Copeland.
COVID-19!
Probably. Have you guys seen that? The WTF
Yeah.
Bra remix? Oh,
Yeah.
So good.
anytime someone says anything about COVID-19, I just kick right to that stupid song.
Yeah, West Virginia is kind of like Florida, where if you go to and Florida's a good example just because people go there. If you go to a city in Florida, it's pretty liberal, and people all there are pretty common sense. But if you leave the city boundaries, that's when the crazy stuff starts.
Right.
That's when all the crazy
Florida
come
man.
out, and it's like, yes, that is when the stuff goes down. And it's kind of the same way in West Virginia, where it's like if you're in the city, like the people that we elect, for at least from our district, are pretty open-minded. But when you go down south, we had a dude that was got elected from Southern West Virginia that had he was cross-eyed because he was in seminary school and he went to a strip club and tried to beat up a black guy, and a gang showed up and tried to beat him up back, and then he called members of the Ku Klux Klan to come help him out, and they got into a brawl, and he was elected to a
Wow.
position in West Virginia. So
I'm not surprised.
as opposed to our delegate that we elected here, which is like a taxi driver who's a musician who likes to do a radio show. That's the Jewish community that really wants to support the farmers. Like, there's a big difference.
God bless America.
Yeah.
Large
We're all
difference.
nuts, and I love it.
We are. Yep.
Crazy, and I love it.
Well, I mean, the good thing, I don't know if you probably saw this today, but your prime minister is not opening up the border for Americans. So I think it's safe from us for a little while longer.
Really?
Oh,
The
yeah.
border's closed?
Yeah.
It's probably a good call, really.
I mean, it's a major problem. People just think that they can just come here and go shopping.
It
and
used to be that way. In the 70s and stuff, you could just like drive up, you know?
Well, isn't there like the crazy people that are saying they're trying to escape America from COVID, and they're saying because you can travel through Canada as long as you're saying that you're going to Alaska.
Well, this is the problem. This is the problem. So I live in Alberta, right, which is above, I don't know, one of your states. And
I don't even know.
I think it's
one of them. I'm
Washington?
a geography major. I don't know.
well, I think it's
Are
Washington.
you on the Pacific side?
Colorado? Washington?
Seattle? Are you near? Is it
Seattle?
like near? Yeah.
And we have a major issue of people saying that they're going to Alaska, but what they do is they just stop in the
Oh,
mountains and they just
no.
have a little vacation. And now there's so they're pulling people over left and right with American plates. Like, why are you stopped here? You know, like you're supposed to be going to Alaska.
That is hilarious.
So, anyways,
I have no desire to go farther north because it's
neither here nor
colder.
there.
Yeah, people for some reason think that West Virginia is very open right now, and so I'm on some of the West Virginia message boards, and then people be like, "Oh, I'm planning a trip to go to Charleston here in a minute. What restaurants are good?" I'm like, "What restaurants are even open?
Right.
Like what is even?" There's nothing. It's like, what is there fun to do? I'm like, I wish there was fun stuff to do. There's nothing. Nothing is open. There are no
Montana.
concerts. There are no.
Montana. Sorry,
you're-
guys.
You're above the middle.
We
Washington
forget that
is
Montana
BC.
exists too. Yeah.
Montana's, I'm sure, beautiful.
Montana. They have horses.
Well,
That's a
the
nice
thing
place.
about West Virginia, though, is people kind of see it as like a miniature Texas, I think, minus the
Yeah.
landscape. Also, but like in West Virginia, all the fun stuff is just outside. Like you go outside to have fun there. Like that's
Right.
the whole point of West Virginia. New River Gorge, go jump off a bridge. That's part of the fun there, literally.
Right.
So you know where I would start to say like where. Oh, no, they do. They paraglide
I know,
off
yeah.
that-
But
they
it's always
paraglide
funny
off
to be like, oh, go jump off a bridge. That's your fun.
Yeah, you could time it right. You could land at a water raft and go down some Class 5 rapids, depending on the year. You know.
You can get in the catapult, which I've literally seen, the human catapult that
Oh,
they
wow.
construct on the bridge that they throw people off of.
This is why people think West Virginia is open because they have a human catapult. I mean,
before I was married and didn't
That's
have
how you're going to get over the border.
We just took the idea from
You guys are like, if we
border.
can't drive over it, wow.
Well,
But here's the
look
weird
at my
thing, though.
trebuchet.
Here's the weird thing. People can't drive. Like, Canadians can't drive across the border to the U.S., but we can fly.
Really?
Wow.
Right now, we can fly. And that's because the administration wants to keep funneling dollars into the airlines.
Yeah,
Right?
to keep them
Because the
afloat,
airlines
yeah.
are hurting. So, yeah, it's interesting.
Well, unless you're a United States airline, you get a giant bailout and then just lay people off.
Yeah, I think we're
it's
dealing
happening
with
here,
Richard,
too.
Richard Branson because he owns Virgin Mobile, and here in the past few, they're putting on this big development project in the state, but he's trying to get a bailout from the British government, and so the West Virginia government's like, I hope he gets his British bailout, and I'm thinking, this is all too. Why?
That's above my head economically. I don't.
Yeah. Anyways, what were we talking about? Vendor, yes, you sir. So talking about zombies and outbreaks and not just the Resident Evil series, but just this like every kind of like little horror game. It seems like even Plague Tale Innocence, there's some sort of like virus situation. And I want to I'm not an expert on viruses. And so I brought in the closest thing I could get to an expert, which is you, Vindertron. So I kind of just want to hear, let's just open the book to page 1. What exactly is epidemiology and why is it important?
Yeah, it's a great question, Dave. So epidemiology, if we break it down, ology is the study of things. And epidem is like epidemics. So really it's the study of diseases within large populations. That's basically what epidemiology is.
So what do you think are some excluding obviously the elephant in the corner of the room, but really isn't the corner of the room, which is really dead center of the room, and we're all just having to suffer through it, is that there's a major international plague known as
Global
COVID-19.
pandemic.
Outside of COVID-19, what are some other, I guess, diseases or stuff that is worth study that people like, when you talk about these, like, is it like the Black Plague? Is there more than that? Are we talking about like cholera? Like, what's some of the big, I guess, like footnotes in the history of epidemiology, which isn't a very positive history, I would imagine.
Well, I mean, epidemiology is steeped in gloom because we study human diseases and pathogens, and that's the whole business. That's the whole nature of it. But I mean, the silver lining is to uplift people and try to, keep good population health going. I mean, you mentioned the Black Death or bubonic plague. I mean, that was one of the earliest, one of the earlier viruses that we know of, which was brought over by, I think it was fleas, flea-infected rats. I think that's. I mean, I'm not. And when it comes to historical epidemiology, I mean, my knowledge of this area is very narrow. But of course, smallpox is a big one, which we've actually been able to really sort of control, and I believe it's not eradicated, or it might be eradicated. I'm not sure. Again, historical.
We'll have to check with the anti-vax.
Yeah.
They keep a vial around in just case of an emergency.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, smallpox originated, if I recall, it originated in Egypt, like thousands of years ago. And it really, smallpox is interesting because it's one of those diseases that depends on human to human contact, not necessarily airborne, but it was so viral. And I think a lot that was largely in part because of the lack of knowledge that we had around infectious diseases at that time. Mm-hmm. But one of the more interesting epidemiology based stories that I would actually like to share is the story of Jon Snow. And I'm not talking about you know nothing, Jon Snow. I'm talking about the Jon Snow, the only Jon Snow that matters. So
Well,
Jon
season 8
Snow,
of Game of Thrones made that not matter. So we will
I know it's
we will
terrible.
say this Jon Snow matters more.
Jon Snow was a British scientist and politician, and just overall philanthropist, I would say, who was the gentleman who discovered cholera. So, in the 1700s, all these people started getting sick and dying, and it was terrible. And the going theory was that it was caused from, they call it a miasma, which is basically polluted air. So all of the smokestacks in London and everything like that caused all these people to get sick. And they thought that theory because the people who lived in higher lying areas that were less polluted were not as sick. But he actually took it upon himself to conduct the first epidemiological randomized control trial ever done, where he went to 42,000 homes across London and surveyed people by himself, because the political party was like, oh, you're wrong, like you're crazy, nobody's going to believe you. So he took it upon himself to do this. And he conducted this massive population-based survey on the health of Londoners, and he traced the outbreak to the Broad Street pump, the water pump in Broad Street, which was contaminated with cholera, and that's how everybody was getting sick. So he's, in my circles, is kind of the founding father of epidemiology, really, and that's one of the winning stories that we like to tout about often. But yeah, but SARS and MERS are the two more common modern day viruses that are causing a lot of problems that we're very worried about and closely watching. COVID-19 falls into that category as well. So, yeah.
So I guess bringing in the scariest thing that I can possibly talk about, possibly the most tiring subject for an epidemiologist to talk about, and maybe the most relevant subject for us to talk about, is posing the question and subsequent questions of what if there was a zombie outbreak? I feel like is like the fun freshman level class that you all sit around at the end of the year and you're like, oh, what would a zombie outbreak look like? So I'm sure that you have some thoughts on that. I kind of want to start off.
Okay, go ahead.
No. You had the expert had some thoughts.
Well, no, I was just going to say that I have a condition among scientists known as technical jargonosis. And so I often go into technical jargon and I explain things very complicated. So if I kind of get off course, just say, what the heck am I talking about?
Let me tell you, I'm an expert in playing roles. So if somebody is very funny, I'm very good at being unfunny. And if somebody is very, very smart, I'm very good at playing entirely dumb. So at least they'll be able to take something dumb from my perspective out of it. So what do you think? And this is also for the group. I'm charging Vendor as the expert, but for the group, it's always fun to think about, or I don't know if it's fun. That's probably a wrong thing, about a zombie outbreak. So what areas would you think would be most susceptible to a zombie outbreak?
Well, I mean, I can really only speak to the types of diseases that are most, I would say, zombie-esque. I leave it to my colleagues to explain about other economic factors.
Vendor, I would let me ask you a question here, Vendor. In a real world-esque scenario, I would venture to guess that a more likely virus, zombie-esque virus, would be like a 28 days later type of thing, like mad cow, where like rabies almost, versus something that brings you back or reanimates you, right? Like that's
yeah. So I mean, you nailed it right there. So I think if we're talking about transmission specifically, the classic zombie virus goes like this. It goes: zombie bites human, human dies. And then human, who is no longer human, becomes zombie and rises from the grave and starts gnawing on people. Now, You know,
You sound so over it. You sound so over it.
on the medical logical side of things, people don't die and come back from the grave. That is just not true. I mean, there's evidence of physical animations after people have passed away, but that is just muscular response, right? There's nothing sentient about that. So I think that, in terms of having a zombie-like apocalypse, or any sort of pandemic like that, I mean, theoretically it's possible, but if we look at the broad range of different viruses, none of them have taken on the nature that we have come to know and love, that is zombie pop culture, right? Those zombie mowing, drooling brains, like animatronic life forms that come up from the ground. Like, I mean, I there's no virus that will ever exhibit that behavior. But I mean, like you said, Rick, rabies is a good example. So rabies is a really interesting virus because I'll say first that there really isn't any sort of psychological disease that makes people want to eat other people.
I've heard some interesting studies on bath salts in Florida.
Actually,
Florida is an anomaly. I mean, at least there is no currently recognized medical science, and I wouldn't exactly say that cannibalism is considered a psychological disease in and of itself. I think it stems from other mental illnesses and clustering of psychological conditions. But
the eating part, real quick, the eating part of it was the idea that not so much that they were driven to eat from a psychological issue, it was they were driven to eat off of base instinct of survival, the zombies. That the base instinct is, I need to eat because surviving. But what I would think would be more realistic is like something where it causes you to just be violent.
So I mean,
like the news.
There are certain culture,
and then there you go.
There are certain culture specific, I think, mental conditions like Wendigo psychosis, which we've seen in certain American Native tribes, is one of the better examples. And I think, in that scenario, people actually think that they're turning into cannibals, but that's really about it. But I mean, if we're going to go back to rabies, this is a virus that causes, massive inflammation and swelling in the brain, mostly transmitted through animal bites. And I mean, thankfully, there's no human to human transmission of rabies, which I wouldn't say no. I would say that it's rare. It almost always occurs due to mismanaged organ transplants, actually.
Oh, really?
Yes. So where there's patients where there's been insufficient background testing before transplantation, there's always a risk, right? It's like HIV, right? If you have an organ coming from an HIV positive patient, you're not going to want to put it in a patient, right? So actually, most people with HIV don't even donate organs or blood. So, but
if I had rabies and I bit you, would you get rabies?
Well, that's the thing. So, the symptoms of rabies, I would say, they could exert zombie-like qualities. I mean, if we really want to go into it, you have full or partial paralysis, you've got mental and cognitive impairment, agitation and unusual behavior, mania, delirium. It's medically possible that you could have like a zombie-like patient that exhibits those characteristics, but people going around biting other people, I mean, interestingly enough, this is a characteristic that's really only observed in animals with rabies.
But I feel like people biting other people is something that happens more often than any of us would like to think about just on the street. I work for a city hall. I manage a police department. I manage EMTs, and human bites are something that happens more often than you would really like to think about.
And I would argue that those scenarios are more related to mental illnesses, not virus specific. I mean, you could by a stretch say that a virus caused somebody to bite somebody else, but it was really the virus that caused the mental and cognitive impairment, and it was the cognitive impairment that caused. So, when you think about it that way, but
the only thing I was
until human rabies manifests itself more like animal rabies, I think that's about as close as we're going to get to real world.
And that's what I was saying. Like,
zombies.
if you're gonna have like the most realistic scenario, it would be more of a virus that makes somebody inherently violent. Which,
I mean, I've got a couple others up my sleeve.
By all means, take off your shirt.
I
Let's see what
mean,
you got
there's. Have you guys heard of sleeping sickness?
No.
So sleeping sickness is it's really the stuff of nightmares. So it's more prevalent in Africa. It's caused from a parasite known as Trypanosoma brucei, and it's transmitted through the tsetse fly. And this particular virus first presents in patients who with headaches. You'll have achy muscles. You'll be itchy, and then in the late stages of the illness, when the parasite actually penetrates the blood-brain barrier, that's when it becomes more apparent. So a typical patient will actually exhibit characteristics of irritability and difficulty concentrating. Their speech becomes slurred. They eventually stop eating. And then, now you have daily disruptions to regular activities, which then cause problems with sleep, major problems with sleep. And then many victims are actually reduced to a sort of zombie-like state before they go into a coma and end up dying. So, I mean, those people that do survive are actually left with permanent brain damage. And we don't really have any sort of vaccine for sleeping sickness, but yeah, that's kind of one of the other ones. There is another one called dysarthria, and that is a disorder that affects specifically motor controls of human speech. So that's a neurological one that causes difficulty in speaking. And usually that is a condition that's a result of another chronic disease like Parkinson's or stroke or anything like that. Rick, you mentioned mad cow. I think that's definitely one. Mad cow is probably one of the most zombie-like viruses, I would say, of all of them.
Didn't some outside of the cow community, wasn't there some non-cows caught the mad cow?
So mad cow is a fatal disease that slowly deteriorates the brain and the spinal cord in cattle. And people, for the most part, don't really get mad cow disease, except in rare cases when the brain and spinal cord or any parts of the nervous tissue of the cow are consumed. And that point, it's not actually called mad cow disease. It's called variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. And so
rolls up the tongue.
There's not really any evidence that we know of that people get mad cow disease from eating a muscle like ground beef or roasts or steak or anything like that. It's specifically the nervous system. So the leading theory is that it's caused from a string of prions or proteins that are made up of in viruses and things like that. But there was a lot of concern back in the 90s, especially in England and in the early 2000s in Canada, where the slaughtering of animals for use of animal feed was a major concern as well. So in the spread of that virus, but that one comes with interesting symptoms. Like you'll usually get like tingling, burning, in like your face and your hands and stuff. But as it advances, you actually start to go into psychosis. And you start having problems moving your body parts and the disease progressively gets worse from there. But it has a really long latency period. So the disease itself actually can happen years after you've eaten the meat. So
that's strange.
Yeah. So regulation on cow product is very highly regulated now. Yeah. So that's one of the other ones. Those are kind of the psychological conditions, I would say, that are sort of zombie-like.
Well,
But go ahead, Dave. Go ahead.
Oh no,
Go ahead.
it seems like that you are you're not overly worried about a zombie outbreak in the style of the pop culture world.
Because
that is at the bottom of your list.
That's the zombie virus in pop culture is highly transmissible, highly infective, and it is violent in nature. And we have not seen like all of the rabies, mad cow disease. There's no human to human transition. What we're more concerned about in the public health space is when pathogens become zoonotic, which means they can jump from animals to humans. That's when it becomes a real problem, because usually, in the case of COVID-19 is a perfect example, we don't know anything about it. So when it comes from an animal and it's infecting humans, we don't know anything about it. We can't get ahead of it. We can't control it. So, things like the flu and other cold viruses like norovirus, we know a lot about those viruses because there's human transmission for centuries. So, but there's a few other I can think of. Necrosis is a good one. Those are like, if we're thinking about viruses for, I would say, like physical abnormalities or deformations, I would say necrosis. I mean, those of you who are up on your Greek roots, necrosis means death. So
I just know necromancers, and that's it.
Yeah.
Isn't that like a skin rotting thing?
Yeah. So it's technically a disease that kind of comes about from various conditions. So cancer, poisoning, injury, infection that eventually leads to cell death. So in a patient with necrotic tissue, I would say that this probably is the closest to like the zombie look, because in a patient with necrotic tissue, especially on the skin, you're going to have, kind of decaying flesh. It's going to be very kind of gross and have that sort of zombie look to it.
It's interesting. It's interesting what the information that you're bringing, because it's like we can't get a perfect zombie virus, but we can get pretty close on some elements of it. So it's like on the report card they could be an A at looks, but they could be a B at violent activity.
They could be totally sharp as a tack, but their arm could be falling off.
The thing is too that people don't talk about, not even the viral side of zombies, but it's the physical side of zombies. Like, first of all, like when winter comes, plague over, pretty much. Like it's still a human body. It's still going to freeze. Not only that, the skin is going to constantly rot. So like in the Resident Evil movies, when like the whole world is just engulfed in zombies, it's like they turn into paper. At some point, they just kind of take a step and bleh.
But what do you mean when winter comes, plague over?
Because they're going to freeze, like physically freeze, depending on the area. Like,
Go ahead, Dave. Go ahead.
No. I'm sorry. I did not mean you. You looked like you were ready. You were ready to pounce.
Well, I was just gonna say that is a common misnomer that people think about, because viruses actually thrive better at cooler temperatures.
Right, but I'm talking about the physical body itself will get slower.
Right. So the zombie virus will probably not go away, but a lot of zombies will probably freeze up, and then you'll be like, "Oh, look, it's the frozen zombie patch outside
Flap
the door."
right in the head. Flap right in the head. I mean, and again, they're going to just continue to rot and rot and rot and rot. So the virus won't go away, but the zombies as a physical form will self-eradicate. So as long as if a zombie, classic zombie, I shouldn't say classic zombie, because classic zombies were voodoo controlled. So the zombie in the sense of virus zombie, classic virus zombie, as long as you go north, young man, and it'll take care of itself. The South, maybe not so much. That middle of the world, equator area, then again, I guess they'll burn. I don't know.
I'll just say that
the equator will smell.
It's inconvenient to film a zombie movie in the winter.
Yeah.
That's really all that like,
Unless you're The
because they're
Walking Dead.
already dead, so technically they could totally survive. They would just be frozen, standing until the thaw,
That's
and
what
then
I
they
mean.
would just keep
walk up to him
moving.
and shoot him in the face. Headshot, dead. Because that's
Yeah,
the only way
yeah.
to truly kill a zombie is to sever the spinal cord.
Yeah.
There.
I just realized
So
that I was
we're-
muted, but I would rather fight zombies than go to a cold climate.
Yeah, from some of the pictures that Vendor posts when he has to go out for in the middle of January, it seems like that is not a
January, February is the worst. It's
not
the
a,
worst, but
not a great time.
yeah, I mean that. Speaking of necrosis, I mean you could lose the tips of your fingers in January here, but
Well, I think Rick was setting up a video game in which Arnold Schwarzenegger playing Mr. Freeze goes and kills all the zombies, which I am here ready to play that the moment it comes out.
yeah, yeah.
I do think that we're kind of circling around. It's like, okay, so there's a bunch of different diseases that could look like zombies, could act like
I got one more. I got one more. Leprosy.
Share one more.
Leprosy.
Leprosy, yeah.
Definitely.
Famous in the
Both-
Bible.
Like, if you think about leprosy, I actually kind of think that's where the original
come from.
ideas for zombies came to be. I mean, if you think about it historically, cases of leprosy have been reported thousands of years ago. It's a disease that causes disfiguration. It doesn't actually, contrary to popular belief, actually cause limbs to fall off or something like that. But I mean, that would be another one that.
Another one.
Yeah.
But it seems like that out of all these diseases, the thing that you're more, I guess, worried about are the SARS, or what's the other terminology that you used?
MERS.
Educate me here. MERS.
Yeah.
Those seem like more taxing on the current climate, especially in this world of COVID-19. So kind of rounding it out, do you think that COVID-19 is going to influence video games differently from, are we going to start seeing more about pandemics in the future? Like, obviously, in the immediate future, we're not going to want to see anything, but just like any other massive, terrible instance, like right after that, you're not going to be seeing a lot of stuff. Like in the middle of Vietnam, we don't want to watch a bunch of Vietnam War movies, but 5 years after that, there's a lot of inspired things, and it becomes a part of culture and telling a story as a medium. So do you think that COVID-19 is going to play a part in video games going into the future as a medium? And that's a
I
question
don't
for
know.
everybody.
I think people will be kind of burnt out by the time it's all said and done. We want to just go back to whatever it is we were doing, but I don't know. I really feel that the impact of video games specifically when it comes to the pandemic itself will be around economic considerations, around, game development specifically, and efficiency. The majority of video game developers have sent their staff home,
Right.
Work remotely indefinitely, like you don't need to come back to the office. You can do everything you need to do from the comforts of your own home. And I mean, that's not the case for everybody, but I think in terms of video game development, that is certainly I think it's going to have more, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen because like, I can speak personally from experience that working remotely at the start was like, yeah, this is awesome. But now I'm like, I don't know what's real anymore. Like I have a 10-second commute from my bed to my office chair, but I don't even know if I'm sitting in is this my office chair? Like
Right.
So I think that there's going to be some mental impacts to video game developers specifically for working, especially for people who have kids, right?
Oh yeah.
But I mean, we live in an information age. We can communicate at all corners of the continent in real time. So, I mean, I have full faith in people being able to keep the pace going with development. But in terms of the actual story around it, like you said, I don't know. What do you think, Shalene?
I think we're really going to see some differences in the way that we look at disasters and apocalypses and post-apocalyptic scenarios. Like, Bottle caps can get right out. Toilet paper is where it's at.
Paper products in general
Right.
and hand sanitizer.
Isn't there? There's like a game coming out about toilet paper, isn't there?
I'm surprised it's not out already. I think we're going to see a big uptick in psychological games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because most of dealing with COVID, honestly, for the majority of humans, is the psychological fallout from it.
I wouldn't be surprised if we seen a game about isolation and like, okay, you have to leave your house. These are the things that you need to have. And like, you go to the store and you get your groceries and you try to not to touch,
Vendor, did you play that game 60 Seconds? Where
Yes.
Where you were in the bunker trying to survive in the bunker. I feel like that
I killed the mom.
Yeah.
I sent her out for food and she never came back.
During the beginning of COVID lockdowns, every excursion to the grocery store felt like a 60 seconds quest, where I was deciding, okay, like which one of us is the lowest risk? Who needs to have the supplies?
Microsoft could literally pull out the radiation storyline from Fallout and insert a virus and just like reproduce the whole franchise.
All you have to do is go to the Super Duper Mart a few times. But I think you're going to see a psychological aspect to games a little bit more. Apocalyptic scenarios, plagues are always going to be a classic trope. It's just now the developers are going to have firsthand knowledge of kind of what it's going to be like. However, stereotypes, I believe, are just reinforced. America's always looked at as this like yeehaw, gung ho, don't care what anybody else tells us to do, we're going to do it anyway kind of thing. That's how we're always viewed. And with Lucky Lou, that's how we've responded to it. So if you're going to have a game where maybe it takes place in Britain, you're going to hear like V for Vendetta, right? America went crazy because we're still fighting each other in V for Vendetta. And so if you have a plague game, more likely, if an America's a player in it, it's going to be a chaotic version. If you have other countries, some are going to be different and better. Mm-hmm. You'll see the same things reinforced, like the Asian cultures are always the ones that are longevity, like Blade Runner. Everything's Chinese, or I guess it's Chinese. I don't know if it's Japanese or Chinese, but everything's like of that culture. They're the ones that win. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just going to be those kind of things reinforced and a more of a psychological aspect put into it these days. After this,
I think that's a great point because like I'm thinking about horror games, and it's like, okay, like a game based, you see a lot of games, like even PT is a great example where it's all based in an apartment, but I think there's going to be a lot more smaller scale situations because the horror of repetition and kind of almost that like what's that movie? And I'm thinking of a very famous The Shining, where it's like they're doing the same thing over and over again. They have to stay in because it's all snowed outside, and it's like continually going crazy, and it's like I wonder if we're going to start seeing more games experiment with that from some element, kind of building off that psychological stuff that Rick was talking about.
Yeah,
I mean, one of the things that I would really like to see that I don't think will ever happen is a video game designed around educating people about even the most basic of science. I mean, we're living in this infodemic as well, which I think is even a greater threat than the pandemic itself on multiple fronts. And it would be really cool to see some sort of education-based game built around the pandemic that sort of shows people how important science really is to population health. But I don't think that will ever happen. That's a pipe dream, that one.
I mean, you have some games that are out there that are like, I'm trying to think of like Papers, Please.
Operation.
Operation. Yeah, that's a little bit of science.
But, I mean, there's this surgical simulator. I was all into it. I wanted to play it. Turns out it's a horror game. It's not a simulation at all.
No.
I'm like, where's the EG leads? There's no EG leads here. Like, right. Scalpel. It's a bone saw, for God's sakes.
Yeah, I think that it would be interesting to see the science, and like we have a lot of things in culture that are representative of games, so it's very easy to learn them. Like I was recently playing Mafia 3, which is a lot about the exploitation of African Americans in the South during the 70s after the Vietnam
Great
War.
game too.
And
Soundtrack is on point.
Soundtrack is on point because that's when all the good music was made in the 70s and 80s and 60s. So there's like that cultural aspect of it, but I'm curious of like, is science too esoteric or like, I don't know, esoteric probably isn't a good word, but is it too, do you think that it would translate into a game like to like have science be the background or the theme? I'm trying to think of games that really teach that. And it's like some games involve science, but the point is like the humanity of others. Like, I'm trying, like, I mean, Resident Evil, I guess, is about science, but I mean, that's not really about science and doesn't teach you anything about science.
I mean, if I were to get really granular, I would say a great idea for a game would be, the development or the journey to developing a vaccine. And, you got to go through all of the trials and all the phases, and you got to test it on all these subjects and animals and humans combined. And you got to, navigate all the symptoms and sort of plan it all out. And,
I'm trying to
lab
think, like,
simulation, so to speak. But
like the first, I don't know if you ever played Spore, but like the first section of that where it's like you are like a microorganism and you have to overpower the other microorganisms.
I really hope that science...
Is that too much fun?
No. I no, it's great. And Plague, was it Plague? The one that was banned in China.
Plague
Inc.
Yeah, Plague
Yeah.
Inc.
I think it was Plague Inc. I played it. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
They've got some good language in there, some epidemiology based language in there. And I think they've got a good job on that. They did a pretty good job on that.
I think the hard part with science is it's very heady, especially when it comes to like biology or epidemiology or something that has to do with like organisms in the body. Where in that case, like Resident Evil, science is the enemy in a way. Scientists were the bad guys. Science is used as a mechanic in games, and oftentimes it's the bad guy.
Yeah.
That's often solved with brute force. Look at Last of Us.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You bring up a really, really important point, Rick, because this is what pop culture has sort of bred the mad scientist.
Yeah.
And this
and the guy with the gun is the hero.
Part of
Right.
This is part of the thing that has actually caused a lot of denialism and anti-science based, culture.
Yeah.
So
it doesn't help that like America's famous scientists also from like the technological age were, Werner von Braun, who may or may not have worked for a few nasty peoples. So it doesn't help that also a lot of the health advancements we had were also from bad guys. Like it's a weird thing. And I think that it's super easy to make scientists bad. And
the thing about
they're also the good guys, though.
And the thing about science too is like, it's complex and it's messy. And I think what a lot of people fail to really understand is that it's not black and white. Like, when an authority comes out and says we need to do this, but then 2 weeks from now they say no, don't do that anymore. Do this instead. People are like, well, I don't know what to believe, right?
Yeah, the scientists were wrong, but the scientists have new information.
Yes, it's not that we were wrong; it's that we believe in science and testing it, right? So it's a little tricky when it comes to that. And I can't remember what it was that I wanted to say about that.
I think it's easy to vilify science because science is difficult to understand for the layman. Science is esoteric. It's something that's science when it's beyond your own comprehension. It looks a little bit like magic, and that's scary.
Yeah. And the thing about it too is like when you go after science, you're really what you're doing is you're questioning reality. And I think, science is it's about exploring the same reality. It has to agree with itself, and it's all part of, reasoning. I think culturally, I mean, we determine stories that we tell each other, but science in and of itself is a method, and the ideas have to work in order to survive specifically. So, yeah, I don't know where I was really going about that, but
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what you're saying is that in video games, kind of tying it back to it. Not often enough do we have like characters that exhibit a more academic idea or try to solve things by critical thinking. There's very little critical thinking in games really anymore.
it's mostly strategy,
Right.
Yeah,
Or brute force.
yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
When you're, I guess when you're playing a strategy game is a good example. When you're playing at a high level, you're thinking critically. But for most of the time, it's when you're playing even blockbuster games, even hard games like Dark Souls, you're just like you're figuring out a weak point and you're just going for that. You're not bringing in all of these different aspects and kind of combining them into what you know and saying, okay, with science, there's no exact right answer because everything is by definition theoretical, because as you go up the board, things could change. Nothing is concrete, but it is the best answer that we can give at the time.
Well, and science, that's exactly it. It's built on theories and ideas, and the process itself is inherently self-critical. And I think, the methods are about testing new ideas and that are against some sort of objective reality. But I think the cultural biases that eventually, come to critique science as a whole are eventually sort of beaten out by those very ideas and theories that we have because they're tested. So I don't know. Sorry, I'm getting all into it now.
Oh no. Well, I wish that we had more time. But I think the great takeaways from today are don't be worried about a zombie outbreak, but still love the survival horror games, and let's get some more representation in our science field. Let's let those little thinkers out and start solving some problems in our favorite video games. I think that sounds like a great idea. I want to thank you all again for coming on the podcast.
Sure.
Now is a perfect time to let the carpet out and let everybody say what they've got going on in your life. If there's any podcasts or projects that you're working on that you want to shout out, and let everybody know where they can reach you at. So we'll start with Shailene here.
Well, of course, We Just Love Games Network is our network. We have Game Stack Podcast, our general gaming show, and that Fallout Show podcast, which is a Fallout-centric podcast, plainly, as the name describes. I'm also on a show called Dames Who Game, which is we're a female-hosted podcast about video games and nerd culture, also makeup and shenanigans. We have a good time.
And if you're really into alternate realities, we sometimes on rare occasions host Dame Stack, which is a
yes, the
crossover.
crossover episodes are always a lot of fun. And you can also find We Just Love Games on YouTube and Twitch, where we record the Survival Horror Sundays that you mentioned earlier. We've played through a couple of Resident Evil games together, Rick and myself, by which I mean Rick plays Resident Evil, while I cower in terror.
Hey, that Resident Evil 7 opening was rough, man.
Ooh, it was scary. It was scary.
I watched that. It was very entertaining from this side of the couch. I mean, it was,
yeah. So that's us.
Rick, what about you?
Same podcast as Shailene mentioned, on our Discord server. On Thursdays, I usually do like a vinyl music stream at 8 p.m. It's not happening tonight, obviously. And I am able to. I don't know how other people would find that Discord. Just, I guess.
Oh yeah, I can give a link for the We Just Love Games Discord. I am active in that Discord, and
yes, you are.
I'm a listener. I'm pretty an active listener of GameStack.
Well, why don't you come on back to GameStack sometime? We miss you.
I mean, I would love that. That would be great.
Yeah, we should.
I would love that.
I was gonna say I'm back on Twitter now. At
what? Really?
Yes, I am.
Oh, I gotta follow Rick again.
I'm
kidding. I'm kidding.
It's okay. So I'm on. I don't even know what my Twitter handle is. What, Rick McVick?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So my Twitter handle is Rick McVick, and I'm also on Instagram at the Rick McVick. And those are places to find me.
I also want to shout out not only the podcasts that you do are great, but the community that you've built is also really fantastic. And I would encourage anyone who is looking for a place to play games, if you're looking for a place, people to play Fallout with, or if you're looking to just like, I'm playing No Man's Sky and the We Just Love Games Discord server, like a great community to be a part of. I will now hand over the red carpet mic to Vendor.
Well, not too much to report from my end. I mean, I'm basically doing all the same things Shalene and Rick said, save for trying to save the world.
Your Twitch channel.
Same thing I do every day, Dave.
You do some Twitch. Oh, I know, but you do some Twitch stuff. Come on, toot your own horn.
Right. So I do some streaming. I have my own Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Vendortron. I'm also on Twitter at VendortronN. I've taken a little bit of a hiatus from Twitter from Twitch for the future here, just until I can sort of sort things out. The federal government has sort of drafted me to assist with the COVID-19 response, and then I'm also helping on the local level. So it's very busy. So I actually haven't had a lot of time, and the time that I have had was really just playing games by myself, sort of unplugging.
Sometimes the best way to play.
Yes, but that's what I'm up to.
Well, thank you all again for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do it.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Dave.
Man, aren't those GameStack people just great? You can check them out on Friday nights. They do a live stream of their podcasts, GameStack and that Fallout show. Recommended listening for this episode. Go and check their podcasts out. There's some great friends of mine, and for the millionth time, I thank them again for being on the show. I've slowed down with some of the episodes that I've put out just because I've had other things going on, like the Starfield Lorecast, which is a project I'm doing with Tom Blair from the Robots Radio Network. I do the Fallout Hub with him. We're doing this weird thing, and you may ask, Starfield is a game by Bethesda that's coming out in the next 10, 20 years, and we don't really know anything about that, so how can we do a Lorecast? Well, it's worth checking out. I did a lot of vocal performances for some of the bits. There's some Microsoft Paint adjacent items. It's quite interesting. So that's one of the reasons that production has slowed down. The other reason is because I like doing longer formatted episodes. This was one of my favorite episodes to date, and I want to do more of those. Unfortunately, those require scheduling because I want to have guests. I want to talk to people. I want to do things with people. I guess that's the magic of podcasting. I've got some other plans for this channel, but I really just want to save this space for a place to dive deep on worlds, environments, modern issues, the range of geography that we can get. That being said, you can check out this podcast on any of the podcatchers that you're on. We have all the social media ready to go. It's at Geography Arcade. You can also follow me at Dave Chavens. There's this new console generation. I'm a big console gamer myself that's coming out. And so there are some interesting things that I definitely want to talk about, like Cyberpunk, Assassin's Creed. That series is obviously full of geography. Watch Dogs Legion, Yakuza. The list goes on. So make sure that you stay tuned. In November, we're going to have some new episodes, some special guests. I've also got some other things in the works. Turns out that once I do one new thing, I have to do 3 at the same time. That's part of my strange neurosis. But I hope you all have a good week, and I will see you all later.